Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tale, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, and shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late now. Let's get into today's tale. A week later, they were sleeping. In their car. They had no idea I heard them. I was standing behind the cooler by the folding tables at the Caldwell family reunion when my father's voice carried through the crowd. "You know," he said, puffing out his chest like he was about to deliver a punchline. "Era is living in that big house all by herself. Cat's spreadsheets, no husband, no kids. I told Doris she's just a miserable little landlord now." Laughter, real full-bellied laughter. A few of my cousins even joined in. I caught the tail end of my mother chiming in. "She runs that place like a prison, shoes off, lights out early. Everything in a row, poor thing, doesn't know how to live." I froze. I remember gripping my paper plate so tightly that the plastic fork snapped in half. I felt this hollow silence in my chest, like something inside me had just slipped away. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I laughed, too quietly nodded, carried on like I hadn't just been reduced to a punchline by the two people who'd been living under my roof rent-free for over 2 years. That night, I drove them home. My mother sat in the back, tired and silent. My dad rode up front, dozing off between red lights. No apology, not even a hint of regret. Just silence. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering every time I'd kept quiet to keep the peace. Every time I offered my car so they didn't have to get rides, every grocery run bill or errand, every sigh from my mother when I walked in the room, every dismissive wave from my father when I dared to speak with authority in my own home. The next morning while they were out, I sat at the dining table with a coffee and printed out 2 copies of a 60-day eviction notice. I didn't cry, I didn't hesitate. I signed the papers like I was signing a birthday card. By the time they came home, with a few bags of groceries, the notices were resting neatly on their pillows. He sat in the living room waiting. My dad got to his first. I could hear the sound of crinkling paper and then footsteps stomping down the hallway. "You have got to be kidding me," he barked. "Is this a joke?" My mother appeared in the hallway, too, holding her own copy with a bewildered expression. "Mia, what is this?" "You know exactly what it is," I said, standing. My hands didn't even shake. "It's a formal notice. You have 60 days to move out. You're evicting us." My dad's face turned red. "You're evicting your own parents? After everything we've done for you, everything you've done to me?" I corrected. "You've lived here 2 years without paying a cent. You've disrespected me in my own home. You humiliated me yesterday in front of the whole family. I've had enough." My mom's voice was softer, calculated. "Sweetheart, you're overreacting. That was just joking around. You know your father, he likes to make people laugh." "You weren't joking," I said. "You were being cruel, and I'm done pretending it's okay." They spent the rest of that day trying every tactic in the book: denial, guilt, sarcasm. "So what, you're going to throw your elderly parents on the street? Do you really think some man's going to move in here with your attitude? You're going to regret this when we're gone." I didn't budge. The 60 days ticked by like a slow countdown to freedom. My home turned colder. We spoke less. Meals were eaten separately. I kept a journal documenting the small slights and jabs. It helped me stay grounded. They didn't believe I'd follow through. Right up to last week, my mother was still buying bulk packs of toilet paper like she planned to be here another season, but I'd already started forwarding mail. I had spoken to a lawyer, made sure all my bases were covered. This wasn't a tantrum. This was me finally setting a boundary. They tried everything in the final 2 weeks. Subtle standoffs turned into overtension. I'd come home from work and find them in the living room, speaking in hushed tones and then going silent. The moment I walked in, the air in the house became heavier. My dad made a show of clanging things in the kitchen like he wanted me to know he was mad but wasn't going to say it outright. My mother started leaving framed photos of our family in more visible places like guilt totems placed strategically around the house. One morning, I found a post-it note on the fridge in my mother's looping handwriting. "One day you'll miss us when we're gone." No signature, just passive-aggressive dread clinging to my breakfast. The silence between us thickened, but my resolve never wavered. I took my laptop to the coffee shop on weekends. I needed fresh air, fresh noise, something besides the slow root of bitterness building inside my own home. I noticed how different I felt just being away from them. It was like I was slowly waking up from something I hadn't even known I'd fallen into one afternoon. I came back early and overheard my mom on the phone. In the guest room, she didn't realize I was in the hallway. "No, she's not backing down," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. "Yes, she actually gave us papers. I don't know what's gotten into her. She used to be so good obedient, always wanting to please no, it's like she thinks she's better than us obedient." That word stuck in my ears long after the call ended. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the patio, and stared up at the clouds for an hour. I thought about every time I'd bitten my tongue, every time I'd clean up after them, paid their share. Canceled plans, skipped holidays with friends so I could stay home and make sure they had dinner, and for what? So they could stand in the backyard and laugh at me like I was some spinster joke to keep their cousins entertained. At the end of the 60 days, they weren't packed. Not a single box. I came home from work to the same sounds. My dad watching TV like he owned the place. My mother simmering in silence at the dining table with her latest crossword puzzle. It was like they'd convinced themselves it wasn't really happening. I waited until dinner to say something. "I'll need your room cleared out by the weekend," I said, standing near the kitchen. Iceland. My dad didn't look up from his meatloaf. "You've made your point." "Mia, no, Dad. This isn't a point. It's a legal notice. You've got 5 days. He finally looked up. "You think you're some big shot now, throwing out your own blood." My mother sighed. "She's not gonna do it. She just wants us to gravel." I didn't flinch. "I've already hired movers to help you pack. You'll have 2 weeks. In Amatel on my dime. After that, you'll need to make arrangements. You're serious." My mom said quietly, almost like she still couldn't believe it. "Yes," I said, "I've never been more serious in my life." The next morning, the air in the house changed again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was frantic. My dad started making phone calls. Old work buddies, church friends, anyone who might let them stay for a while. I heard him trying to sound casual like this wasn't a plea, but it was. My mom started putting things into boxes with jerky, resentful movements, sighing loudly with each item. And me, I got quieter, not out of fear, but piece a piece I hadn't felt in years. They packed slowly, begrudgingly, but the reality was finally sinking in. I had the locks changed the day after they left. The day they left, there was no goodbye. Just the low rumble of their old Ford as it pulled out of my driveway for the last time. It was mid-morning on a Saturday. I remember standing at the upstairs window, coffee in hand, watching as my dad struggled to fit the last few boxes into the trunk. My mother stood off to the side, arms folded, eyes darting up to the window, like she knew I was there. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just watched. There was a deep silence once they were gone. Nada, cold, heavy silence. I'd grown used to, but a clean, weightless kind. The kind of silence that didn't press on your chest, but invited you to finally exhale. I took the longest shower of my life. I vacuumed. I opened the windows. I played music, loud, unapologetic music. That night, I lit candles in the living room and ate a dinner on the couch. No judgment, no sighs from across the room. No our movies blasting from the next room, just me, my food and peace. I didn't hear from them that first week. Then one afternoon, I got a call from my Aunt Hannah. She was always the one who floated somewhere in the middle of our family, neither too close nor too distant. She called to check in, but I could hear the curiosity in her voice. "You know they're staying in their car, right?" she said quietly, at the old Food Lion parking lot on Maple. It's not great." I didn't say anything. "I'm not trying to make you feel bad," she added quickly. "But I thought you should know." It thanked her for letting me know and hung up. Then I got in my car. I don't even know why I went. Maybe some sliver of me wanted to make sure they were okay. Or maybe I just needed to see it with my own eyes to believe this had really happened. It was nearly dark when it pulled into the lot. There, tucked away, under a broken street lamp, was their car. My dad was in the front seat, slouched low, staring at his phone. My mother sat in the back. Her head leaned against the window, eyes closed. I didn't get out. I sat at the far end of the lot and watched for a while. No movement, no conversation. Just two people wrapped in their own silence. And something about that hit me harder than I expected. Not guilt, but a kind of quiet sadness. The kind you feel when you finally see something clearly after years of convincing yourself it was different. I didn't drive over to them, I didn't. Roll down my window, I just drove away. That night I wrote a check to a local extended stay motel and arranged for them to have a room for the next two. Weeks, I didn't tell them it was from me. I had the clerk make it anonymous. A few days later, they were gone from the parking lot and I slept better than I had in years. But the calls started soon after. Block numbers, voicemails filled with silence or sometimes a heavy breath and then a click. One message came through from my father. "You've embarrassed this family," he said. His voice was steady but low. "You think you're better than us now." But blood remembers, blood doesn't forget. I didn't reply. The strange thing is the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of space, of clarity, of healing. I started spending time with friends again. I reconnected with people I distanced myself from, all in the name of family obligations. I even saw Ben again. We ran into each other at the farmer's market. It was awkward at first, but he smiled and asked how I'd been. I didn't go into details, but I think he could see it on my face. Something had shifted. "You seem lighter," he said. And I was finally living in a home that felt like mine. No whispers, no backhanded remarks, no guilt woven into every meal and movement, just me, the sound of fetish washer humming in the background, and the quiet ticking of a wall clock that, for once, didn't feel like a countdown. Tommy, next fight. It wasn't until weeks later that I realized something strange was happening in the family group chat. I was still in it, technically, though I rarely posted. But the tone had changed, where it used to be filled with emojis, birthday reminders, and vague recipe links. It now felt like a quiet surveillance channel. No one said anything about the eviction, but the silence was loud in a way only family silence can be. My cousin Blair sent a message. "One day, anyone want to meet up for brunch next Sunday?" Normally, there'd be a flood of responses. That day, just one thumbs up. No follow-ups. It was like the air in the family had shifted, like everyone was holding their breath around me, waiting to see if I'd blow up again or break. But I didn't. I just watched. And then one night, I got an unexpected call. This time it wasn't a blocked number. It was from Marlene, my father's sister. She'd always been sharp-toned, boot observant, the kind of aunt who could clock family drama like radar and usually kept her opinions to herself until it was safe to speak up. "Hey Mia," she said casually. "Just wanted to check in. I ran into your mom yesterday at the pharmacy." My grip on the phone tightened, but I kept my voice neutral. "Oh, she looked tired. Older, humbled. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet." Marlene sighed. "I'm not going to pretend like I understand everything that happened. But I will say this. Sometimes the strongest boundary is the one that makes everyone uncomfortable. Doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it's overdue." That stuck with me. Not in a dramatic, profound way, but in the quiet sort of way that comes back to you at red lights and while folding laundry. Overdue. That's what all of this had been, a reckoning I put off for years in the name of being the good daughter growing up. I learned early that my parents' moods were things to be managed, not challenged. My mom's disappointment was a weapon, and my father's pride was always brittle, ready to snap if I dared question. Him, I became quiet, agreeable, helpful to a fault. But all those years of being good didn't protect me from their judgment. They still saw me as lacking, incomplete, not enough. They took my kindness and called it loneliness. They took my home and turned it into theirs. They took my silence and filled it with their noise. So now I am taking it back. Slowly, I began repainting the guest room, the one my mother had filled with doilies and old magazines, and her constant humming. I replaced the heavy curtains with soft linen ones that let in light. I bought new bedding, soft and simple. I even added a small plant near the window, a peace lily. I was reclaiming space inch by inch. Around this time, I also started therapy. I didn't go in seeking answers. I went in because I needed someone who didn't know my family to hear the story and not flinch. And week after week, that's what happened. I talked. My therapist listened, and little by little, the knots began to loosen. I don't want to be cruel. I told her once, but I also don't. Want to live like I owe them my peace just because they raised me. She nodded. That's not cruelty, Mia, that's clarity. I started showing up differently, not louder, just firmer. I declined the next few family gatherings politely, directly, no excuses. And when Blair texted asking if I was still mad, I wrote back, I'm not mad, I'm healing, there's a difference. She didn't reply, but I didn't need her to. It had been about 3 months since they left my house when I got a card in the mail. It was addressed in my mother's handwriting, flourishy, slightly shaky as always. No return address. I stood in the kitchen. For a long time before opening it wasn't a birthday, not a holiday, just a plain cream-colored card with a gold border and a flower embossed in the corner. Inside a short message, we raised you the best we could. Sorry if that wasn't enough. We're still your parents. Don't forget that no love no from mom and dad. Just that I read it twice. 3 times. It wasn't really an apology. It was an emotional trap wrapped in sentiment but laced with the same old message we did our part. You owe us anyway. I didn't respond thee. Next week, I came home from work to find a small basket on my front porch. Muffins of all things, blueberry. My dad's favorite, not mine. No note, I checked my camera footage. They'd parked down the street and walked up, like they were strangers. My mom placed the basket gently, looked up at the camera. Once then turned and walked back to the car without knocking. That night, I didn't touch the muffins. I tossed the whole thing in the trash and wiped down the counter. It felt symbolic, but I didn't cry. I didn't even feel rage anymore. Just clarity. This wasn't a reunion attempt. It was a test. They wanted to see if they could crack the door open, just enough to slip back into my life before. I noticed the draft, and the old me might have let them. Might have seen. That card is a peace offering. Taken the muffins a truce, but I'd changed. They hadn't. A few days later, I got a voicemail, this time from my mother, Mia. It's me. Your father and I were just hoping maybe we could talk. Maybe come by for dinner sometime. Just talk. We've missed you. I played it twice. Her tone was almost soft enough to pass. For sincerity, almost. But even in that message, there was no acknowledgement of what they'd done. No apology for the way they'd belittled me. Torment, my generosity turned family into shame. Just let us back in, laced with guilt and nostalgia. I didn't call back. Instead, I blocked the number. I knew what came next, because I'd lived it. When you stop responding to guilt, guilt becomes anger. When you stop enabling manipulation, manipulators get loud. So I wasn't surprised when the call started again from different numbers, or when Aunt Hannah messaged me saying, "Your mom's been really emotional. Could you just call her?" She says she's not sleeping. I replied, "I'm not responsible for her sleep." Or, "Hear emotions, I'm responsible for my peace." Hannah didn't reply. The harder part was when the guilt came from outside. Not from my parents, but from well-meaning relatives who didn't understand what it was like inside my house for those 2 years, or the 35 before that. My uncle even pulled me aside at a gathering I briefly attended months later. "She's still your mother," Miyahi said in that heavy, loaded way. People say things when they think they're wise. There's no replacing her. I looked him in the eye and said, "She replaced her role in my life when she stopped treating me like her daughter and started treating me like a maid." He blinked. That shut him up. I left early that night, went home, lit a candle, and journaled for an hour. I wrote about the day I brought my parents into my home out of compassion and how they slowly eroded that space with mockery and control, how I'd sacrificed my peace, my dignity, my relationship, everything just to be their daughter in the way they wanted, and how finally I had chosen myself for the first time over and over again. It was early November when I got the call, not from them, from the hospital. A nurse identified herself and said my mother had been admitted the night before after fainting at a laundromat, mild dehydration. She added, "Some stress-related symptoms, but she's stable now. She listed you as her emergency contact." Of course she did. The phrase emergency contact hit me like a cold slap. All this time they hadn't removed me. Not after everything I thanked. The nurse hung up and sat there in my kitchen staring at the grain and the wood on the table. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Worry. Anger, guilt. None of it came. Just a hollow stillness, the kind you feel right before a hard decision. I drove to the hospital, not because I felt obligated, but because I needed to see for myself. One last time, not out of care, but clarity. When I walked into the room, my mother looked smaller than I remembered, paler. Her hair wasn't done the way she usually liked it. She was awake, sitting up, fiddling with her gown like she was nervous to see me. "Mia," she said, surprised. "I wasn't sure if you'd come istayed. At the foot of the bed, you listed me as your emergency contact." She smiled weakly. "Well, you are my daughter." I nodded. "How are you feeling?" "Tired?" she said. "It's been a lot lately." The silence that followed was heavy. I didn't sit down. She didn't ask me to. "You didn't have to come," she said. "Finally, I wouldn't have blamed you if you didn't." "I know." She looked down at her hands. "I've been thinking about you a lot, about what happened." I didn't speak. I waited. "I know we said things," she continued, "and maybe we didn't appreciate you like we should have, but it's hard being a parent. You do the best you can and hope it's enough." I exhaled slowly. "And when it's not, you blame the child." Her eyes flicked up to mine. "That's not what I'm saying. But it's what you've done my entire life." She didn't respond. I stepped a little closer, not out of tenderness, but to make sure she heard me. "I came here to make sure you were okay, and you are. But I need you to understand something. This isn't a reset button. I'm not moving backwards. I'm not letting you or Dad back. And not into my house. Not into my peace." Her eyes welled a bit. "We're not the villains, Mia." "No," I said. "But you were never the heroes either." And I stopped waiting for one. I turned toward the door. "If you really want to make things right," I added before leaving, "you can start by removing me as your emergency contact. I'm not your safety net anymore." I didn't wait for a reply. As I walked out into the crisp fall air, something shifted in me. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. It was like closing a chapter, not with Aslam, but a gentle click. On the drive home, I rolled down the window just a crack enough to feel the wind, to breathe in the clean, cold air that no longer carried the weight of keeping anyone else afloat. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a whole person. A few months past winter came cold mornings, quiet evenings, and the kind of stillness that only exists in a house that's truly your own. There was no shouting from the other room, no judgmental sighs. No one slammed cabinet doors and passive protest, just peace. I'd wake up early and open the curtains in silence. The light came in differently, now softer. I started taking weekend walks again. I cooked for myself without the pressure of pretending I was hosting. I read books, real books, not escape fantasies, but things I could sit with and think about. I bought fresh flowers and let them die in their own time. And slowly I started feeling like myself, or maybe someone I'd never had the chance to be. My parents didn't reach out again after the hospital visit. No voicemails, no cards, no sudden drive-bys. I don't know if it was pride or resignation, or maybe they finally understood. Either way, the silence was its own kind of apology. I heard from extended family, occasionally. Some danced around the topic. Others avoided it altogether. A few quietly admitted in passing that maybe you did what we all wished we could do. That last one stayed with me. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd grown. Up under heavy shadows and unspoken rules, I'd just been the first to say enough out loud, and without backing down, one day in early spring, I came home to a small envelope taped Tommy door. No name on the front, just my address. Inside was a single typed note: "Thank you for the motel. We know it was you. We won't bother you again. Take care of yourself. DNP. No warmth, no guilt, no expectation." And for once, I didn't feel the need to analyze it. I slipped it into a drawer, not out of sentiment but closure. It was the only acknowledgement I would get, and that was enough. Last weekend, I hosted a small dinner for friends, people who knew me now, not Themey, who existed in survival mode all those years. The table was full of laughter, open bottles of wine, mismatched plates, and soft music in the background. No one rearranged the dishes, no one criticized the lighting. Noon made backhanded jokes at my expense. And at one point, as I leaned back in my chair, wine glass in hand, I realized I hadn't thought about them in weeks. Not because I forced them out of my head, but because they no longer occupied space. There, they didn't get to live in my rent-free anymore either. I looked around the table at these kind, brilliant, flawed, but respectful people, and I smiled. Not the strange smile I used to wear like armor, a real one. This was my home, and I'd finally come home to myself.